I'm going to go ahead and take off the gas tank here, fuel tank rather. It's got two screws at the bottom, the kind of the star pattern. This is a number 27, and I'll disconnect the fuel lines, and this is almost full of gas. I'm going to take it off with the gas in there and take that grommet off and see if I can see anything clogged in there. First get this cover off. Okay, this tank is ready to come off. There's actually 3 screws. There's another one in the bottom, and there were 2 over here. So this whole tank is ready to slide off. I got the fuel lines off. Top was the primer, and the bottom is the fuel line. And the fuel tank is now off. I did pick up a repower kit, they call it, which is it includes a new filter and lines for this particular model Echo. It's kit number 90127, and we're going to go ahead and just completely replace the fuel line and everything in here. So this whole unit just pulls out. This filter appears to be a little bit hard and doesn't look all that bad, but we're going to replace it anyway, and the grommet on here. I dumped all the fuel out of this first and looked at it. There's no water in it. It doesn't seem to be dirty, so we're going to reuse that fuel in here. And this is what the new filter and lines and check valve look like. So with a grommet, I'm going to install that in the tank now. So we got the new fuel lines in and the new grommet and check valve. So we're going to go ahead and put this back on and add the fuel back in and see if that's going to fix the priming problem. Well, even after replacing the fuel lines and filter, part number 90127, I'm still not getting any prime in here at all in this Echo weed eater. So I have gotten a new gasket kit for this carburetor, part number GND66, and it's got all the gaskets in here. And we're gonna first take off where this primer button is, and I do have an extra primer bulb. I'll probably go ahead and replace that gasket before taking the entire carburetor off. So I'm taking the 4 screws out of here, and I've had some gas leaking out of here as I take these out. I removed the air filter housing as well. When you loosen this carburetor can come completely off. Right now I just want to take this primer bulb section off. So there's nothing really wrong with this primer bulb. I'm going to replace it anyway, but since I got a gasket kit, it's really just as easy to go ahead and take the throttle loose, this connector here, and the gas lines and primer line, and go ahead and take this apart and clean it and put in this gasket kit. It's a diaphragm and gasket here, and underneath there's a metering gasket. And this linkage, throttle linkage, just comes off with a 10mm wrench. And loosen this, and this will come right off. Like that. So that's disconnected. Disconnect the fuel lines, and this carburetor should be off, which would be much easier to work on now. And there we go. So we're going to go ahead and take this apart and clean this up. It actually looks really clean. As where the metering is underneath, I got gaskets for that, and as well as the gasket and diaphragm for this side. I'm going to start with the gasket and diaphragm section first. This is where I'm thinking the problem is, right here. Gonna have some gas coming out of this. Alright, let's clean this and get this gasket off. It does look like there is some trash in here. So I got all the new parts here. I'm going to go ahead and put the new primer bulb on. I've got a gasket and a diaphragm. Here's the old parts here. Don't really see anything wrong with them. And this carburetor is clean now. So let's go ahead and reassemble this part. Put the gasket on first, right in these pins, and then the diaphragm goes on top of that, on the pins as well. Now we're just going to reassemble this with the new primer bulb. And we'll get this on, make sure this all lines up. And get this screw back in that holds this. There we go. And we'll get the new primer bulb on. The primer bulb just sits on top here. And we'll tighten this down and then we'll go to the metering side. Okay, the diaphragm and gasket's in, new primer bulb, it feels good. Of course I didn't feel anything wrong with the other one. Now let's take the metering side out. And here are those screws coming out. You have to remember what order to put all this back in. Alright, let's clean this out. We got the needle in here as well. And put the new gasket back on and metering gasket. This is also where the needle is as well. I'm going to take all this out and clean this before we put the gasket. And there is a spring, little bitty parts. Don't want to lose them. Clean all this up and put it back together, then put the gasket. Got this all cleaned up and took the needle out and cleaned that as well. Now I'm ready to put the new gasket and metering diaphragm on top. Let's get the screws in here and take my time putting this on. There we go, got it fully assembled, ready to install back on the Echo Weed Eater here now. New primer bulb, new gaskets in here, diaphragm and gasket. And this is where the metering gasket and diaphragm went. Got the fuel lines connected back up. Now the matter of putting back the throttle. Throttle's back on. Matter of bolting this up with the air filter cover. Alright, let me get this finished back up. Looks like it is priming. Got gas in the bulb. Let's see if we can give it a start.